Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as we've told how to voice radio, so today I'm going to be showing you one of the most exciting new cards from the upcoming Pokémon Sun and Moon trading card game expansion. It is Tauros Gx. Now, you will have to forgive the slight croakiness. I am deep in the mire of the Continental Championships, but I'm still taking a break in my hotel room showing you all about Tauros Gx. Now, it is a basic GX, it's got 180 HP. Compare it to things like Snorlax GX, that sounds pretty much about right. Now, it's a colourless Pokemon, which means it can be put into any deck whatsoever, and the thing that really stood out to me when I first saw this card, all three attacks can be used for a double colourless energy. That means that as long as you're using double colourless energy in any way, shape or form, you can put a Tauros GX into your deck. Now, retreat cost of 3 is expensive but expected. Weakness to fighting, I've talked about this a little bit recently. Things like Zygarde could pose it problems, but it's not the worst weakness to have. And of course, being a colourless type means that you're never going to be hitting anything for weakness. So, time to have a look at how good some of these attacks might be. Now, the bad one here is Horn Attack. 60 damage, double colourless energy. It's not atrocious. And certainly on turn 1 of the game, your opponent flips over a throw key, you go Tauros, DCE, and then you just get to go and do 60 damage and get the KO. We've all had games where our opponent has one weak Pokemon and doesn't draw anything else. Tauros is very good at knocking out these Pokemon. But really, the two attacks we're looking at here are Rage and Mad Bull GX, and they're very similar. So let's start with Rage. Double colourless energy, 20 damage plus 10 for each damage on Tauros. So, 180 HP means a maximum of 170 damage on him, meaning you're doing 190 for a double colourless. Unless, of course, you put a Fighting Fury belt on Tauros, which gives him 220 HP, so he could theoretically have 210 damage on him, meaning that you would do 230 damage, but the 10 for the Fighting Fury bout would make it 240 for a double colourless energy. That, ladies and gentlemen, is quite ridiculous. But it gets more ridiculous, because Mad Bull GX does 30 damage times the number of damage counters on this Pokemon. So if you get the maximum 170 damage on Tauros, he will actually hit for a whopping 510 damage. Unless, of course, you put a Fighting Fury belt on him, at which point you can have 21 damage counters on him and do 630 damage. Let's say you've got 180 HP EX or GX. Well, that means just 6 damage counters on Tauros is a one-hit KO. Let's say there's a Pokemon with 210 HP. That means 7 damage counters. And actually, if we go ahead and get 8 damage counters onto Tauros GX, we can be hitting for a whopping 240 damage. Now, you might, for some Pokemon that have 250 HP, you might need to go up to 9 damage counters to hit for 270. Either way, this is frankly ridiculous. This can one-hit KO anything in the game with not much damage on at all. That means that your opponent has to do one of two things. Either they one-hit KO Tauros, and there's plenty of cards in the format, like Zygarde, like Mega Rayquaza, that will be able to do so, or they attack you and cross your fingers you don't choose this GX attack. Now, GX attacks are 1 per game, so you can only use this once, and it's the only GX attack you can use if you choose to use it. Now, this is a brilliant deterrent. It will mean that your opponent doesn't attack unless they can get a one-hit KO. But there is a huge downside here, and that is your opponent controls the game. So let's say, for argument's sake, your opponent's got 180 HP. Well, they hit you for 50. So you're only hitting for 150 back. You're not getting the KO, and that means that they should be pretty safe, and then next turn they can do the next 130. It puts your opponent in the driver's seat, and that is not something you want to do very often. For that reason, as fun as this card is, I don't think it is going to be the basis of its own deck. And that makes me a little bit sad, but I think that's where we are here. I don't think it will ever be its own deck. But we don't need it to be its own deck, because what we can do here is we can use the card Ninja Boy. Ninja Boy allows you to switch one of your basic Pokemon for another one of your basic Pokemon, and it's exactly the same, and you keep things like the damage counters. Now, usually keeping the damage counters makes you a little bit sad. Not in this situation. You want to keep the damage counters, because then you can go ahead and do this GX attack, or even do the regular attack, because let's face it, 20 plus 10 for each damage counter on Tauros can still be pretty good. Let's say you play something like a Pidgeot EX. Now this covers your weakness, because rather than being weak to fighting, it resists fighting, and your opponent might not be expecting the Tauros. So what you do is you play Ninja Boy, you play a single Tauros GX, and then if at any point your opponent puts enough damage counters on Tauros, out you come and you get the KO. I love Tauros GX. Now, I don't think he's good enough in a deck on his own. I do not like playing decks where your opponent is able to control the game and control your damage output. But I do think in any deck that can play Ninja Boy and double colorless energy, he should be a one-of in every single one of those decks. And the reason, very simply, is at any point in the game, you can drop a Ninja Boy and a double colorless, and you can take a KO your opponent isn't expecting. And if your opponent knows you've got the ability to drop a Ninja Boy double colorless energy, that means they are going to have to play all game thinking, oh, how much damage do I do? Do I want to risk the KO? For that reason, I am going to have to give Tauros GX a whopping 4 or 5 Wassies. We don't give half Wassies. That would be barbaric. Now, you know the deal, ladies and gentlemen. Pop in the comments. Am I being too effusive in my praise? I do not think that I am, but of course, let me know. Make sure you click that like button and that subscribe button. It's YouTube. We know how it works. And make sure you follow me on Twitter at The Wassie. Look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.